I never meant for it to happen. I never went looking for that feeling. But there's something about forbidden connections that burn brighter than anything else. Have you ever felt something so intensely that you knew it was wrong, but you couldn't stop yourself from wanting more? This is that story. The one I've never told anyone, until now. When I arrived at my sister's beach house that summer, I thought it would be just another quiet vacation. The kind where you read books on the sand, drink too much wine at sunset, and go home with nothing but tan lines and seashells. I had no idea how much would change in those 3 weeks. How one person would make me question everything I thought I knew about myself. The beach house was this gorgeous 2-story place right on the water. You could hear the waves from every room, like the ocean was whispering secrets all day and night. My sister had mentioned her colleague would be staying there too, something about a work project they were collaborating on. But she hadn't mentioned what Mark was like. Before I continue my story, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe to Tales of Lust and hit that notification bell. Trust me, you don't want to miss the stories I share here. I remember the first morning clearly. I was sitting on the deck with my coffee, watching the sunrise turn the sky pink. I heard the sliding door open behind me and turned to see him standing there. Mark, tall with these eyes that seemed to change color with the light. He asked if he could join me, and I nodded, not thinking anything of it. We talked about nothing important that first morning. The weather, how beautiful the beach was, how good it felt to escape the city. But there was something about the way he listened. Really listened, you know? Not just waiting for his turn to speak. When I talked about my work as a graphic designer, he asked questions that showed he was genuinely interested. That's rare, isn't it? Someone who truly wants to understand your world. The next morning, I found myself hoping he'd join me again. And he did. It became our routine. Coffee at sunrise, just the two of us, while my sister and everyone else in the house was still asleep. He told me about growing up in a small town, how he'd always dreamed of seeing the world. I told him about my failed relationships, my fears about never finding someone who truly understood me. Days passed, and our conversations grew deeper. He taught me how to play his guitar, sitting close behind me, his hands guiding mine to form chords I couldn't seem to master. I showed him my secret spot further down the beach, a small cove hidden by rocks where the shells were pristine and untouched. We'd walk there in comfortable silence, occasionally brushing shoulders. I noticed my sister giving us curious looks at dinner, but she never said anything. Maybe she thought it was just a friendship. Maybe I was telling myself the same thing. By the end of the first week, we had inside jokes. He knew how I took my coffee, and I knew the exact way his eyes crinkled when he laughed at something I said. We stayed up later than everyone else, talking on the deck under the stars. One night, we talked until 3 a.m., and I couldn't even remember what about, just that I hadn't wanted it to end. Then came that moment, the one where everything shifted. We were reaching for the same book on the coffee table, something about coastal wildlife, and his hand brushed against mine. It was nothing, really. Just a touch. But I felt it like electricity through my entire body, and when I looked up, he was staring at me with an intensity that made me look away first. I found myself suddenly aware of him in a different way. The space he took up in a room. The sound of his footsteps coming down the hall. I'd catch him looking at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention, across the dinner table from the other side of the living room, as we walked with the group along the shore. I started checking my phone constantly for his texts. Simple messages about dinner plans or asking if I wanted anything from the store suddenly held hidden meanings I analyzed for hours. Was I imagining this? Was this connection just in my head? I began making excuses to spend time with him. I'd offer to help him with dinner prep. I'd suggest movies I knew he wanted to see. I canceled plans with an old friend who was visiting a nearby town because Mark mentioned wanting to show me a lookout point up the coast. The guilt was creeping in. I'd lie awake at night, my heart racing, wondering what I was doing. This wasn't me. I didn't do things like this. I didn't feel things like this for someone who wasn't available. Yes, there's something I haven't mentioned yet. Mark was engaged. His fiancée was back in the city working. And I was married. My husband couldn't join me that summer because of work deadlines. The rings on our fingers should have been barriers enough, but somehow they became almost invisible when we were together. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the storm. It was about 10 days into my stay when the weather changed dramatically. The forecast had warned about a summer thunderstorm, but no one expected how powerful it would be. The sky turned an eerie dark gray by mid-afternoon. The waves, usually gentle and rhythmic, began crashing violently against the shore. Everyone retreated inside as the first fat raindrops began to fall. The power went out around 8 p.m. My sister found candles, and we all sat in the living room, listening to the storm rage outside. Thunder shook the walls. Lightning illuminated the room in brief, electric flashes. One by one, people drifted off to bed, until it was just Mark and me left in the living room. The candlelight cast shadows across his face, making his features look softer, more vulnerable somehow. We sat on opposite ends of the couch at first, but as the house grew colder without the heating, he offered to share the only blanket. I hesitated for just a moment before moving closer. We sat there, shoulders touching, watching the storm through the windows. The thunder outside mirrored the chaos in my chest. I was intensely aware of every point where our bodies connected, shoulder, arm, the side of my thigh against his. Neither of us moved away. Neither of us spoke about it. He asked me about my life back home, and I found myself telling him things I rarely shared with anyone. About the growing distance between my husband and me. How sometimes I felt more alone in my marriage than I ever did when I was single. He told me about his doubts about his engagement, how sometimes he wondered if he was making a mistake. We weren't touching inappropriately. We weren't saying anything explicitly wrong. But the intention behind our words, the unspoken current between us, that was where the real transgression lay. Morning came, and with it, clarity and shame. What was I doing? This was my sister's colleague. This was someone else's fiancé. And I was someone else's wife. I made a decision then to put some distance between us. I started waking up later, missing our sunrise coffee meetings. I'd sit with my sister during meals instead of next to him. I made excuses to go into town alone. He noticed, of course. 3 days of this avoidance, and he finally cornered me in the kitchen when everyone else was out on the beach. "What's going on?" He asked me. "You've barely said 2 words to me since the storm. Did I do something wrong?" I couldn't look him in the eye. I said something about needing space, about remembering my priorities. He didn't push, but I could feel the hurt radiating from him as he walked away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went out to the deck around midnight, thinking I'd be alone with my thoughts. But he was already there, looking out at the ocean. Another storm was brewing on the horizon. We could see lightning flashing in the distance, still too far away to hear the thunder. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Then, without looking at me, he said words that changed everything. "I think about you more than I should," he said quietly. "I know it's wrong, but I can't stop." My heart felt like it might beat out of my chest. I wanted to walk away. I wanted to run. I wanted to be the person who made the right choice. Instead, I found myself moving closer. "I feel the same way," I whispered. "And I hate myself for it." He turned to me then, and the look in his eyes, a mixture of relief, desire, and profound sadness, broke something open inside me. We talked for hours about our feelings, about the impossibility of them, about the people who would be hurt if we acted on what we wanted. I told him how he made me feel seen in a way I hadn't in years. How our conversations were the highlight of my days. How I found myself thinking about him constantly. I begged him to never stop making me feel this way, I said, tears filling my eyes. To never stop seeing me like this. And he promised he wouldn't. We didn't kiss that night. We didn't touch beyond him wiping away a tear that escaped down my cheek. But the emotional intimacy felt more profound, more illicit than any physical affair could have been. I barely slept that night, my mind spinning with conflicting emotions. By morning, I knew what I had to do. While everyone was out for a group breakfast, something I'd begged off from claiming a headache, I packed my bags. I couldn't stay another week as planned. Not if I wanted to be someone I could live with. I wrote a note explaining that a work emergency had come up. It was a coward's way out, but I couldn't face him again. Couldn't trust myself to make the right choice if I looked into his eyes one more time. I was halfway home, for hours into my drive, when my phone buzzed with a text from him. I pulled over at a rest stop to read it, my hands shaking. "I understand why you left," he wrote. "You weren't alone in feeling what you felt. But I think we both know this is for the best." I sat there crying in my car for almost an hour, relief and grief battling inside me. I responded simply, "Thank you for understanding." Some connections aren't meant to be explored, just remembered. Going back to my normal life was surreal. My husband was happy to see me home early. I threw myself into work, into my marriage, trying to recapture feelings that had been fading long before I met Mark. I never told anyone what happened, or almost happened, at that beach house. My sister mentioned a few months later that Mark had broken off his engagement. I pretended it didn't affect me, pretended my heart didn't race at the news. I didn't reach out to him, and he respected my silence. Sometimes the strongest connections are the ones we have to break. Was I wrong for feeling what I felt? Or was it human to want to be understood so completely? The most dangerous affairs begin in the mind and heart long before they reach the body. Perhaps the greatest act of love can sometimes be walking away. I still think about those sunrise coffee conversations, about the storm and candlelight, about the person who saw parts of me that had been invisible for so long. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed, if I'd chosen differently. But I've learned that wondering doesn't change reality. Some moments aren't meant to be repeated, just remembered. Have you ever had to choose between what feels right and what is right? Between connection and commitment? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, make sure to subscribe to Tales of Lust for more true stories of forbidden desire and the choices we make. Hit that like button if you've ever had to walk away from someone who understood you too well. Until next time, remember that the heart wants what it wants, but sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same.